content of everything.
I said improve your articulation.
But that can only be done once the people own their own education. Nobody in this country owns the education system. Therefore, we are dependent on the education the rich give us. And the rich will give you, as always through history, either no education or the worst education. I'm interested to hear what you think.
Okay,
I've said it's a fallacy.
The rich are prudent enough to create their own educational institutes from their own wealth. I could set up a trust tomorrow. With £10,000, have my trustees and my board, and set up an educational trust. And this is common law. This government couldn't tell me the curriculum that I'm able to educate the children under. I could do that tomorrow. Set up an educational trust and deliver. It cost me £2,500 to set up the trust. I would become a sovereign. My trustees would become sovereigns.
And the rent of the building?
No, we're not talking about the building now. We're talking about the curriculum.
But it doesn't really happen though, to be honest.
So again,
that doesn't really happen to you.
No, they do. They do it in free schools. And all of these educational trusts.
Well, I'm talking about
primary level.
This is my subject.
You see, educational trusts.
Right.
They actually lie outside of UK legislation. And if you this is why if you try to interfere, the government can't even help you. So a trust is in common law.
Yeah, it gives you independence to do what you want.
That's when I talk about sovereignty.
What? Give me an example of an educational trust that educates a lot of people privately without government intervention.
Brother, do you know? So you see, now this is the thing that a lot of people don't realise.
I never heard of it.
And it's not to say anyone is. It's just we don't know what we don't know.
Go on.
So a lot of these academic trusts, people don't realise are trusts, and they own like 8 schools.
Which ones, like?
I want to come in on this.
Anybody can do a Google search.
They don't dictate the curriculum.
No, brother.
They might own the schools.
The curriculum.
I don't think they do. No, I don't think they do.
You can see, as an educational trust, you have the option to deliver whatever curriculum you desire.
I see. Can you give a real example? Makes sense. The Jewish schools.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's a different story.
No, it's not different. It's not a different
he's
story.
right, he's right. I get his point.
It's working within the legislative law of this nation. But what are trusts? The same way as their wealth protection is because they create sovereignty, which means that the state can't actually access that wealth. Because if they could, they would.
So you're saying they set up, they determine the curriculum?
Absolutely, they determine their
government interference.
Brother,
that's a good point.
You don't need, brother, you do not need the government's permission. Because you operate outside of legislative law.
Yeah, sure, go for it.
This is the point that I'm making.
But you can't do that at higher education levels.
No, you can.
Well, and that's where you need to give examples. Tell me at a university that's private and determines its own curriculum. I've never heard of it in this country.
Can you give a real example?
You got to be able to say
you know what the problem is with us, in terms of that, if you have an academy, why would you make it harder for yourself in a relationship with government?
Right.
Now, with us, and I speak for African people, we don't have the economics to actually execute, so it becomes academic. At some stage, in incorporating that trust, we may raise money which are taxable, tax write-off donations against corporation tax to actually fund it. But it's academic at this point, you understand?
Can I ask you, is there a black one? Because if that was the case, there would be some black somebody doing this.
Brother, listen to 1 minute, brother. Listen to what I
Can
just
I
said.
come in at some stage?
You can. But let me finish my point.
I'd really like you to.
No, I'm not finished. I actually happen to work with a number of African Caribbean educators, and the reason I make this point about us not having the economy is because I'm aware, as a community, we have failed to organise effectively enough to pool our resources to finance such an institution. However, we have the liberty to do so. That's the point that I'm making.
Yeah, democratic.
But has someone done so? That's what I need to ask.
Brother, you're not listening to me. We have failed
so nobody
because nobody is stopping us.
But can I ask you something?
I want to ask you,
Go on.
Absolutely.
who do you have to deal to get this going, to stop this thing, this trust? Who do you have to deal with?
A trust writer. So that's a trust writer who deals with sovereignty, which is common law as opposed to legislative.
Where do you find this?
Hey, they're around. I happen to know one.
So can I ask you,
For our purposes.
do you think it
I
doesn't-
merely lack the finance.
Do you think it doesn't exist because nobody's aware of this? Or do you
Lack
think
the
it's-
finances.
I
Because
don't
we
because
felt. We know that about it. We
I
felt.
personally have spoken on it in a room full of African Caribbean educators. We lack the finances. So this guy has
Well,
spoken.
okay.
Please.
School in this country is not compulsory, okay?
Absolutely, I'm a homeschooler.
You need your trust. You can just get
I'm a homeschooler.
families to get. My daughter's 25, never went to school a day in her life, has a master's in journalism, okay? I know what I'm talking about. You can just get a number of families together. If you want to, you can rent a bloody church hall, you can do all sorts of stuff. You don't need, 20,000 or whatever to put together a trust. You can do that now. School is not compulsory. You do not have to follow the curriculum. You don't have to have set lessons. You can do basically what you want. And like I said, I did it, so I know.
Not at the higher
5 years.
education level, though, and I think that's
No,
what's really
you
important.
can.
Because, but you have to give an example.
So you're homeschooling.
Are you talking about university or
Exactly, higher education, degree level.
Yeah.
I don't think you can do that, and that's where
You
that's.
can't do it.
Will we wrap it up quite soon?
Yes, right.
Time and stuff. So
You do it.
Thank you very much,
Prime
Chair.
Minister.
Up to matriculate.
Independent schools like you've been describing are the bedrock for a destruction of a democracy in the country. They undermine,
they create independent thinkers.
No, there's nothing.
they undermine what is established as giving a child a rounded education. Rather,
against it
I haven't finished yet, gentlemen. Your points this afternoon have been brilliant, and you've had the opportunity to articulate them with exquisite passion all afternoon. Thank you. So, they are. Why? Because something like a comprehensive school is obliged by law to give a comprehensive education to all children. What we find with schools like this gentleman's trying to teach here is they have a narrow remit of responsibility to their children, and also they have a narrow remit of responsibility for that child. They can dismiss children on wing without any questions. Their obligation to the community at best is tentative, at best. But at the moment we have lots of schools like that which have been accused for wholesaling, getting rid of children they deem not worthy for their skill, just getting rid of them like that because it might affect their grades. But worst of all, I go back to my point earlier on, they are the destruction of democracy itself. Because when you have children educated with a narrow curriculum, not inclusive of all the community, that is the very birth and start of division and hatred within a community.
So can I ask? So you're
Just condemn the whole.
Well, the gentleman here
I
just...
need to ask this. So are you saying, correct me if I'm wrong, is your concern, for example, if somebody set up such a thing as was described and
He's trying to do it with the best of his
and they
heart.
were teaching, for example, just black history or black education? Is that an example of what you mean?
What I mean
By
is
destruction.
is the exclusion of something like evolution or education of somebody else's religion or the exclusion of science, which is now dominantly happening in these schools. Because who is the leaders in these schools at the moment? It's not just our gentleman here, but it is religious groups who have now got the excuse to set up religious schools. And religious schools, they are teaching historically that this group of people are the enemy, we are the chosen people, and the chosen people, you deserve this land, this inheritance, because of the colour of your skin and
You're sounding
background.
very risque. You're
Shut
sounding
up,
very
will you?
risque.
Exactly.
They got it.
Exactly.
They got it.
Exactly.
That's
You're
what
sounding risque.
That's
Getting in
what-
these boots, mate.
That's what independent schools deliver. That's what academies deliver and private schools deliver. Exclusion of others and the promotion of you or your community just based on
But the educational system does that. It's been doing that for 2,000
the
years.
education comprehensive
really.
system
Yes, it has.
was
Not really.
actually
Yes.
incorporating all religions. They are, by law couldn't just educate one religion, Muslim, Christian or Jewish.
But that's New World
They
Order.
had to
That's
teach
New World
all.
Order.
World order.
and there is one message given, and there are two messages heard. So, as English people here would hear, if I were given an assembly and I said ethnic minorities, I'd hear one thing, and English people would hear a completely different thing.
Exactly.
And
But at
then you
least
look
you
at how
have
the
that
school was
diversity.
decorated.
Rather than having a monoculture in your
English
school,
history,
You have
would
a
also-
comprehensive selection of community. Independent schools, they just have one group they deem worthy of that education. Everybody should have that education on African history, not just one tiny group.
Absolutely.
You,
So then, if that's the case, why aren't they
See,
teaching
he
it in the
wouldn't be
schools?
interested for
So
what?
if they're really, it's a shame that the institution isn't as concerned as you are, or they'd be teaching proper African history
Yes,
in the
you're
schools
right.
and not transatlantic
Because we
slavery.
don't own
Not telling us
our
we're monkey
education
MPs
system.
And then white people say that.
I'm
They'd be teaching
proposing
proper African
we end
history.
up owning our education system, so you don't have to be rich or exclusive,
But hold on,
but comprehensive.
But what
Own
you're
it if
ranting
you
and
want
raving
to
against
own
is what the system's failing to do. But you're not ranting and raving against them, are you?
I am.
No, you're not.
I say we don't own the education system. How's that not ranting and raving? That's the very definition of ranting and raving, is saying we don't own the education system. Thank
do
you.
own the education system. You can take your children out of school.
Anytime
you
you
can
feel
teach them what you want to. Now, is there something wrong with a parent? If a parent has a belief, an honest belief in Buddha or Judaism or whatever, is there something wrong
Yes.
with them wanting their children
Yes.
to be taught along those lines? I
Yes,
don't see it.
absolutely.
As a parent, I do
Absolutely.
not see it.
They
If you
should-
want a homogenisation of society, that society should all be taught exactly the same thing,
Yeah.
no.
But the same thing is equal agreement of other
No,
people's
it's
ideas
not.
and
No,
religions.
it isn't.
It's not. It isn't.
That's the way it should be.
Anyway, that's.
I don't think that's a
You
good
got your
idea
point.
anyway. I think, well, if you do look at some of the most successful schools that produce productive, intelligent, and able people, they don't limit their education to religion or race or silly things like this. So we should aim to give a good education, whatever the
Absolutely.
form may be. It has to be a good, strong, solid education. But I'd like to marry up immigration and education, since that was the original thing. And I went to a bog, as they say, bog standard comprehensive inner city London, and I was in the minority of people born in Britain. And one thing that you do see immigration has a really bad effect on is education standards in primary and secondary schools, because I unfortunately had to be educated with people who didn't have the best grasp of the language, and so they had to basically dumb down certain elements of the education, and that means that a lot of us who spoke the language and maybe had a better acuity than others had to be educated on the same level, and that's one of the worst parts about immigration. It unfortunately has to bring the curriculum down to a substandard level in some senses, you know. I think everyone needs to think about this. At the end of the day, not everyone comes to this country knowing the language, and there's not enough initiatives to make people learn the language effectively.
So what's your proposal?
Well, nothing that would combat that specifically, but like I said, the education system, the education system just needs to improve. I've always said, people can't complain about anything in this country. The only thing that I think people can really complain about in this country is the education system. If that was fixed, everyone would get along better. It would go on.
So that's interesting. But you know, but the funny thing.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. Sorry, can I say something? Yeah, but no, the funny thing is, I went to a private school, and you know, a lot of the stuff I thought I was taught was just hot air. Do you know what I mean? And no, actually, no. I did all three. I did the state system, private system, and then I did the grammar school, which was kind of state, but a good state school. And I preferred the grammar school. It was brilliant because I wasn't highly clever, and I was struggling at school. But what I see though is actually. And some of you might agree with me that it doesn't constitute a very bright man to actually, if you're talking about wealth, accumulation of wealth, they actually don't go together, because you've got a lot of people like, you know, Branson, who was a dropout, and you know, so some of these other billionaires or very wealthy people in this country, they haven't been very well educated. So I'm not sure that having a super private education is the way forward. In fact, I wish I hadn't gone to private school, to tell you the truth. In fact, I think what would be good for everybody is that they get an apprenticeship.
Financial literacy.
An apprenticeship, so that everybody leaves school with some kind of training, as opposed to just hot air about, oh, that might have happened 300 years ago in history, and evolutionary biology or blah. Do you know what I'm saying?
But do you know what you're talking about?
What?
You're talking about problem solving skills. The accumulation and evolution of great problem solving skills are what make an entrepreneur. It's the ability to solve problems, be able to charge for solving those problems. This is what business does. It provides public problems which charges a fee, it gets paid. And the greater your profit. That's how he built Virgin Airways. He was trapped on an island. He went and found out how much it would cost to charter a plane, went around the airport to all of the people, whipped the money from them, made a profit, and it was based on problem solving skills. So perhaps if schools taught critical thinking, then the problem in society would be that you have free thinkers. And nobody wants the proletariat and the great unwashed to be free thinkers. And this is what we're talking about with education.
But what they do want is people hating and blaming the other people who are poor as well, saying that immigration's the problem of the education system, rather than having an education system built for all people in this country, rather than just built for the rich.
Do you really think, like, you've clearly read 1984, do you really think that they are trying to suppress the proletariat's knowledge? And how are they?
Can you just explain that statement? Can you explain that statement for me?
Absolutely.
Right.
When I say there are tiers of education in this nation, so when you have an Eton, and then you will let's look at the lowest common denominator as a state school, which is why I homeschool. I recognise that it is impossible as a teacher with 30 plus students in a classroom to serve everyone. This is why we have supplementary schools, so we can give a supplementary education. My particular case is that my son, we deemed there was teacher bullying, so we took him out. And when you're dealing with a classroom where there are state resources and then they are taking money out of the school system, it's the teachers that they're putting in there and the low caliber of teachers that you're going to get at the bottom of the economic chain. Now you've got to remember, a low caliber of teacher who is raving on a Friday night now, taking cocaine, ecstasy, coming back to the classroom on a Monday, who now, not like the old system, sees themselves as kind of a peer with students. It's very hard for you to now graduate that system and be a peer with Etonians who are coming from a very established educational form, who are introduced to society, who have leaders of industry going into the schools. So now if I said I was an ex-gang member, I can go into the comprehensive school. So I was in the gang, yeah? And basically I'm telling you, man, don't do it. Because I just came out from 5 years. Now let's flip that with Eton. I've just gone to Deutsche Bank because my old man is a corporate director, and he comes in and teaches us that money is a game. It's made out of thin air. When you have an idea, go to an investment bank and they'll give you money based on your idea and the sweat equity of the team you put together. Got it, chaps? He's leaving and he's competing with him. Do you see the point?
Do you not think that London or that this country is a fair ground for entrepreneurs? Would you?
Absolutely. And if I'm frank,
right,
is one of the greatest on this country. For all my complaining, is one of the greatest countries and easiest to set up a business in the world. And as I said, if I were in a burning apartment, I guarantee you I'd make it out. But the other 80 people, if we look at it statistically, maybe not so many people would escape from the building. This is what I talk about when we talk about education, because it has to serve the greater number than the anomaly who can escape.
Now, that was a good account of inequality in education, but you said that there's powers that be that are trying to keep the proletariat uneducated.
Absolutely.
That's conspiracy theory, though, isn't it?
It's your reality. You're living it.
It doesn't make sense, though.
But is it true, though?
Globally.
No, but let's stick to Britain.
Okay, let's stick to Britain. So, in any area, and it all trickles down to economics.
Yes.
And the pyramid structure of power. At the same time as we have an information, we live in an information economy. I know what I use YouTube. is the greatest university on earth. Eat the chicken and spit out the bones. Now, I have conversations with different people, and they'll tell me what they use YouTube for. And I'm astounded that they actually have that much time in their day to consume what they consume. Now, from your basic education, from your peer base, what you consume does become culture. So we talk about youth culture and what they consume. They have opportunity to consume you can see masters of industry at the highest echelons of any sector, and you watching people get stabbed, you watching people talking nonsense, and it's bizarre, but it is.
Hold that thought.
And I know I didn't answer your question.
You didn't, yeah. Because that's. But do you believe that the proletariat are being held down and stopped in some way? Because
that's the bit I asked. I wanted you to explain.
You've got to. If you don't, then you can't possibly understand why you had a bad education.
Absolutely.
No. Because I already.
It wasn't an accident.
No, but I already acknowledged the inequalities of education. He made it different.
And it comes down to this.
No, because, and besides, look, let me just continue. Anyone can go to Oxford.
Absolutely. Almost.
Go on, who's going to get stopped? People who haven't performed well educationally.
How do you know that anyone can go to Oxford? You meet a lot of people who go to Oxford.
Okay, do you want me to give you stats here? Because I got stats. Bro.
Yeah, give stats.
Did you know, that more than 50% of Oxbridge students are state schools? That's more than you would think, isn't it?
And what's
that? State school. Anyone can go. It's changed. I'm telling you. Education is opened up.
And what's the percentage of that come from rich parents' still? Because you have.
No, you don't.
Because you have state schools with rich parents who go to state schools. It isn't just all working class.
What does it matter then?
I'm saying that statistic isn't as true as you think it is. That's all I'm saying.
No, but you don't know that.
Yeah, I do, because I went to state school and I know lots of private school kids.
Yeah, but I'm telling you the stats.
And I also know that. Yes, I know, but stats out in black and white. If you make it. That's all the point I'm making.
You're telling me could be. You're telling me, the stats could be this.
I'm not saying
it also
it's
includes
black as
people like me,
white.
though.
I don't want to get into debate on this.
Okay, well,
I made my
But
point.
anyway, look, education to the highest levels is accessible to anyone who performs well.
Before you make your point, can I just make one very tiny point?
It does happen.
Can I make one very tiny point?
You can train to be a lawyer if you want, you know. You can train to be anything you want.
If you got
I just
money.
want to make one tiny point.
Well, are there not loans on offer?
Do you know how much a loan education
There
on a lawyer? Do you know how much the total cost is?
I'm in debt. Yeah, you're right. But you can take one out. You can take one out.
And force upon yourself £100,000 of debt.
The greatest
Good
lie.
education should have a price.
No, good education should be free for all, for
it's
every
not- it's not
opportunity.
practical in the
That
ideal
is
world.
practical
When
and
you
absolute.
pay, you pay attention.
No, you don't.
bro.
That
When
means
you
most.
pay, you pay attention.
That is absolute nonsense.
the point
We've
I
got
was
Boris
gonna make-
Johnson proving that point is absolute rubbish itself.
greatest
Eton
lie-
and Oxbridge.
The greatest
Absolute
lie-
moron is
The
Boris.
greatest lie ever told is omission. It's what is omitted from the state education, which doesn't enable the vast majority to compete with those of higher echelon educational institutions.
You reckon that's it? Omission. So what do they know that we don't?
It's about what you're exposed to.
Isn't it teaching quality, materials quality, scholarship, the teaching of reading and writing ability, research, critical ability? These are what, if you have a good teacher, these things will happen. I don't think omission of content will mean anything.
How much is critical thinking on the national curriculum?
Well, I got it.
I think it's something more than just critical thinking, even though critical thinking does make a part of it.
It's one of many things, yeah.
You see, if you go to a very high education place like Oxford, for example, you get a good education, right? You become a professional or something. You know something very well, probably. But just because you become a very good detail in the machine of society doesn't mean you're an essential detail. Doesn't mean you're the button that is pressed when something is done. Doesn't mean you're the part of the machine that makes all the other parts obey. That is the difference.
You're on a diet.
Just because you're a genius artisan
Bad boy.
or a genius general or whatever doesn't mean that you are ruling.
Right. What
That's
does
the
then?
biggest difference.
What does make them then?
What does mean? Understanding, not money, understanding. If you have understanding over how the world is functioning,
Governed.
exactly,
Absolutely.
how everything functions, you have a grasp over taking that power for yourself.
Sorry,
And that's
I would
the
say
biggest difference, I would say.
Really?
Absolutely.
Sorry, just okay.
Which is why there are societies who teach men how to stand on this square, infiltrate, and work their way to those positions. It's an absolute.
Okay, but I would say that money buys privilege. You're talking about
Absolutely,
right.
money buys
So you're talking
Yes,
about
but not always.
Let him finish, please.
Sorry, go
Okay,
ahead.
so I just coming back to some of these really interesting points, and this is a really interesting conversation. I would say that money buys privilege. So you're talking about the Harvards, the Oxfords. Of course, you can flunk your exams, but someone will know someone who can then open a door for you. 100%. So money buys privilege. But I wouldn't say that good education makes you somebody who can necessarily make a lot of money. So from my perspective, right?
That's
So,
problem solving.
right, so we've got a god of education saying, actually, get your degree at Oxford and Cambridge and all will be well. But statistically, it's not those people. They're very
become
clever,
multimillionaires.
right? They're very clever who are making the money, and I'm saying the money buys the privilege. So what I'm saying is, I wish that someone had said to me, leave school at 16 and start your own
Make
business.
as many mistakes as you
Yeah,
can.
but listen,
all the way
there's a
through.
problem in this.
Rather than worshipping the god of education, which my parents and lots of people in this country do, and people in Oxford
There's
and
many
Cambridge,
gods of education.
right? But right, so I would say to everybody, start your own business at 16 if you
Right.
want to.
Okay. Can I
Right.
reply to that?
Sure.
It's just money worship, and education gives you far more than economic acuity. It gives you an education. Now, if you leave school at 16 and make a business, you're going to go from cradle to grave with no real educational knowledge.
That's not true.
That's
If
not
you
true.
get education
That's
in your
not
core,
true in
that's not good.
2019
If you're
because
educated
we
in
live
core,
in the era of information.
I
Information
never
is
said
as
that. I never
easily
said
as
to be educated
accessible,
and poor.
more easily accessible than it's ever been at any time in history. Across
Yeah,
every
true,
topic.
true.
From esoteric knowledge all the way through to economics, whatever you want to learn. And you can do it in your own time, running your business, in whatever free moments you get, of which you will have plenty.
Well, I don't know, man. I find that people who are business-minded tend not to care about education or knowledge in any sort of
You know,
sense.
sometimes
I
it's the other
don't,
way
so
around.
now, to give you an
If
example.
it don't make money, why do
Sir,
it, bro?
sir,
And that's the kind of
sir,
thinking that influences.
So now I'm
You
going
know
to
what I
say
mean? This
something to you.
entrepreneurial mindset doesn't leave space
Sir.
for interest or
Sir.
not.
Let him
Well, hold
finish.
on. Don't worry, bro.
It's not true.
Let him finish.
Well, it does, bro. Unfortunately, if you look at, I know a lot of people went try to avoid the education thing because they didn't see it as immediate profit. And now they're in profit-based mindsets.
But then
that ain't gonna free you.
But
But
then
this
on the flip
country
side, a lot
is
of
run
people
by a lot of
educated
very
and broke.
educated, stupid
A lot of
people.
people got degrees and working at
Thank you.
McDonald's
Based
or not
on
working at
nepotism
school. That's the flip
and the
side.
privilege of.
Thank you very much.
That is very
the
much
flip
the
side.
flip side.
But brother, hold on.
People have got
I had a business since 18
What are you
years
trying to
old.
say?
people left, right, and centre are coming out of college. A degree is nothing anymore. Anybody can get a degree.
No, but
They're broke.
not all degrees are equal. Though.
No, it's not a big
If you get a
but
degree
it's
in
not a big
dance,
deal
you
to
ain't
have a
getting a
degree.
job, bro.
It's not a big deal to have a degree today. It's not a big deal. Anybody can get
Sorry,
one. All these
what
people
was
are
that
broke.
point? Because he
They're
asked a
broke.
question about you were saying that certain people are
He
being
said, what he
withheld
said is
information.
if entrepreneurs go about start on the journey of making money, then an education becomes asinine. That's not true.
No.
The greatest
Yeah.
entrepreneurs understand that lifelong learning and that pursuit. You see, the landscape of business is constantly evolving. It will never settle. And definitely in the age of technology, I speak as a business owner, I speak as a homeschooler, I speak as a lifelong learner. YouTube is my university. So now, bear with me, brother, I'm not even finished my point.
I haven't said
So
anything.
I introduce myself to a peer base of men from different expertise, and I get a peer education.
Okay, yeah.
So
fair enough.
I have entered into a contract with a financial institution, having no background, to recruit managers for their wealth management academy. True. Which I have. And then I got a peer education from colleagues. I'm on LinkedIn. I have 4,000 connections. I go to lunch. I buy these people drinks, and I just get a peer education all the time. And there are many entrepreneurs who do exactly the same because it's interesting company to have, and you're constantly learning. So it's not true, bro.
No, yeah.
And it's ultimately
You're right.
the greater your education, the more profitable it is to you. because the greater your problem-solving skills become.
Okay, thank you. But no, look, you're right. Many people, obviously, who go into business will have many opportunities to become educated in their own ways. And obviously, resources like YouTube are great in the modern day. However, none of which replace a formal education. One thing that we haven't seen on the internet is the digitization of scholarship. Books sometimes are only available in book format, and you know better than anyone, young people do not read, yeah? And if they do read, they read Twilight or something.
Definitely.
Now, the good thing about a formal education is it forces you to look at scholarship, things that you may not interest you. You have to look at them.
But interesting.
Yeah, exactly. They become interesting, but the reason they make you look at scholarship is to see the breadth of human knowledge. Now, the unfortunate thing about YouTube and internet learning is it's self-directed. People just look at what they're interested in. Formal education doesn't give a fuck about that. It teaches you what you need to know.
Yeah.
And that's why I always support formal education.
Well done. Very good.
I'd like to address something that this gentleman said about money. Just a very short thing to say. Money is absolutely worthless if you don't know how to use it properly.
Absolutely.
If you don't know how to use it, you will squander it like a fool. You'll just lose it just like that. You need to take certain precautions, certain steps, so that you can use the money more proficiently.
Okay, but I wasn't talking about in a sense of profession, I was talking about in a sense of privilege, like this man was saying, within Harvard and Oxford and paying for, that kind of education.
You can be a brilliant idiot.
But right, so people go to Harvard not to necessarily get an education, but so that when they leave, they've got connections to then, get bank loans and to, of course, right. That's what I meant.
Okay, fine, but still, it all comes down to knowledge how things work. If you know how they work, you can get money.
But people with too much knowledge, it's been proven, aren't are worse off at making money. The exceptionally bright are worse than those that are not so bright. They've proven in making money.
What you mean.
Right.
But the problem for that is a different conversation. It's because human character can develop in different directions. I see human character as a star with different rays of different lengths. When you develop yourself in one direction, inevitably you can't maximize your development in all other directions.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
Which means, some of the people with the highest IQ in the world are living very lonely, very terrible lives because they have no social skills. They don't know how to put that high IQ into
that's a very good point.
So again, it takes a very specific kind of knowledge, not just brute intelligence, not just brute IQ, not just that.
But I would say who's the guy? The computer man, Alan Sugar, Branson's. They don't have a lot of head knowledge, but I would say some of these entrepreneurs have got great intuition.
No, but they
or
do.
People skills.
It's not. What they don't have is the academia.
Yeah.
But they do.
But I would say that works in their. I would say that works in their favour.
They have amazing problem solving. But what they have as well, this is the heart of an entrepreneur. It's about courage. It's about gaining experience because there's no substitute for experience. Now you can have as much academia as you like, but watching adult movies isn't practice for making love to a woman. There's no substitute for experience unless you get out and you make mistakes and you actually have that hours and hours and hours of experience. You won't be able to execute in the world. So when you talk about that person who's got all of that knowledge and can't go into the room and actually articulate themselves or create relationships based on their personality, because the rays shine off them. It's based on experience. And there is something about studying upon studying upon studying in academic realms that stunts you from going into that room and actually breaking free.
Which is what I was trying to say.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Right, so I think, can we wrap up there?
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got to start with the end of that one.
Yeah, it's a good moment to
There
wrap
you
up.
go. All right, well, thank you, everyone. Like I said,
Thank you.
next week we'll tackle something else, but give yourself a round of
That's very
applause.
nice.
God bless
Sorry,
you all.
Yo, Mustafa, you arrived and immediately don't like it.
The elite, you said, conspiracy. Seriously. The way you articulate yourself is extraordinary.
Content over everything. From now to
Come, man, say it straight. Man, don't listen to BBC. Man, don't listen to ITV.
Living in an information experience. I know what I use YouTube. It's the greatest university on earth. Eat the chicken and spit out the bones. Now, I have conversations with different people, and they'll tell me what they use YouTube for. And I'm astounded that they actually have that